All right, so I'm gonna do something out of the book, Abide book.
Okay.
Something that was one of my favorite ones writing. Something I'm really passionate about, but also learning about. And it was actually based on this Tim Keller booklet, this little booklet that when I was first really started following Jesus full-heartedly when I was 17, my friend Jake Moliere started this small group Bible study, but it wasn't really a Bible study, it was more of a fellowship. And he went through this little booklet with us. It's called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. Have you guys ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And the title really struck me. And in the book, he talks a lot about how our culture either focuses too much on ourselves or not enough on ourselves. And he's saying there's actually a freedom in forgetting yourself because you're so focused on God. So I wanted to talk about this devotional. It's based on 1 Corinthians 4:4, where Paul says, "For I am not aware of anything against myself. I am not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me." And I said, Paul had a proper view of self, which enabled him to succeed in the Christian life. His self-perspective is seen when he says, "But with me, it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself. I am not aware of anything against myself. I am not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness, and will disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his commendation from God." 1 Corinthians 4:3-5. Paul faced criticism from the Corinthian church on many fronts, none of which were valid. In the public slander of his own character, he was able to stand strong because he had a clear conscience before God. Man looks on the outward appearance and judges, but God weighs the heart. Only God knows our hearts. The Bible teaches that we can't even understand our own hearts. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart. Jeremiah 17:8-9. There are two sides of the spectrum that Christians face when viewing themselves in light of God. First, they are numb to their sin due to a seared conscience and feel comfortable in sin. But second is a morbid self-criticism that leaves someone in self-bondage. Both are a result of a Christless perspective. As Christians, we ought to assess the danger we have the habit of falling into. I can sometimes overanalyze my actions and motives to a point where it is unhealthy. This is not the Father's heart for me or any of his children. Pronouncing judgment on yourself before the time and trying to figure out the purposes of your heart is God's job, not your job. We must be careful not to set our minds on things of man rather than the things of God. The secret to having a right view of yourself is to gaze upon Christ. It is not about thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Lift up your eyes to the hills and see that your help comes from the Lord. Colossians 3 says, "If you have been raised with Christ, seek the things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." The Puritans used to have this statement: with every one glance you take at yourself, you should take 10 gazes back at the cross. Let our attention be on the beauty of God, for he is our judge and our friend. In looking more at Christ, we will experience the freedom of self-forgetfulness. So this is the reflection. Are you too hard on yourself or too easy on yourself? And then the second question is, how can you allow Christ's perspective of you to override your negative thinking habits? So basically, in summary, what the book talked about is we can either be so obsessive about our motives and we're constantly looking inward and we're judging ourselves and it kind of paralyzes us. But then we can be so on the other side, like, oh, I don't, everything I'm doing is right. And we can be actually sinning and not even repenting of that. So we can be like over repentant, or we could be like kind of over having a high view of ourselves. So kind of I wanted to ask our staff, like, what do you feel like your tendency is? And I thought about this too. This is really important in ministry because as we're doing so many things for God, for his glory, we should be, maybe a little bit aware of our motives, but not too aware. And we need to have that good balance.